Hey, I'm glad you're here. Welcome to the Manhood podcast. My guest today is Chris Lee Wilson of the Unshakable Man. Chris is a men's coach and joined me today to discuss ego and the true self. We also got into spiritual psychology, emotions, and the real meaning of love. This episode is really packed with a lot of great information, and Chris also provides some good resources. If you've been listening to the Mission Manhood podcast and enjoying, I hope that you can take a minute to subscribe or even leave a review. I really appreciate you being a part of this, and thanks for joining. I'm here today with Chris Wilson, men's coach. Hi, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going really well. I met you through Instagram, and I have to say I really enjoy your posts.
Oh, thank you so much.
You know what I really like are your doodles.
Yeah, those doodles are they're a big part of my self-directed learning process. I find that anytime that I learn something or that something comes up multiple times, both in my work, working with men as a men's coach, but also in my own life, just anytime something comes up a few times, I'll keep notes in various places, but then by the time it makes it to a doodle, it means it was truly resonant to me and came up multiple times.
Yeah, sometimes it's so helpful to see a picture. Words are important, and a lot of times you put words with them, but it just makes it really clear for me I always want somebody to draw me a picture literally, and so that's what you do. So
yeah, it's funny. I find maybe this will jive with you, but I noticed that the act of doodling or the act of hand, even if it's not a doodle, just writing out with my own hand a quote or a statement or a learning artifact that I want to remember slows me down and takes me out of this digital space where it's almost like information overload, and then I remember it better.
Yeah, that's a really good point. In fact, before I got on this call with you, I wrote out some things just to kind of help me. It makes it clearer to me because one of the things I reached out to you on, you did a doodle on ego. Actually, it was almost like a little poem that you did. And then below that, you wrote some information about ego. So today, before we got on this call, I wrote down like the definition of ego and several different things. And I think I knew this, but I was reminded that ego in Latin is I. So I know I have learned that before, but it was a great reminder.
That's great. I really appreciate you doing that. It's funny, that was going to be one of the main things that I was going to come back to in this conversation that even I often forget, but resonated with me.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit. Ego, I have to say, is one of those things that everybody seems to know the word. And when I say it, I think my clients kind of get the gist of the understanding. But it's one of those things, if you ask somebody to define it, I bet they would have a hard time with it. And so I thought maybe we could start out kind of saying what we've wrestled with and what it means to us. And I'll let you go first since I want to pick your brain about this.
I mean, right off the top of my head, my ego is my constructed set of concepts and stories that I have created about who I am based on what has happened to me in my life, because my mind is a meaning-making machine, and events don't have an inherent meaning. I put meaning on them. And my ego, until I noticed and stumbled upon this new reality or this new experience of my life and realized that I am not this reality of this thing, this one singular thing, I am other things. The ego was me. I was the ego. And so for me, I think to build a relationship with the ego, I have to explore what it is not, right? Because how can I know what the ego is if I'm always operating in it?
Okay. I feel like there were a couple of things there to unravel.
Oh, there's a lot.
Tell, tell me a little bit more about your concept of the meaning making machine.
Hmm. So I guess this just comes to my, like, I never, like from my learning around and poking around, like one of my favorite books is the Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, learning an interest in spirituality. And spirituality and spiritual psychology is the art and practice of awakening into the awareness of who we truly are as divine beings. So, and all spiritual practices really essentially answer three questions, right? Or they attempt to, right? Which is, who am I? Why am I here? And how can I make a more meaningful contribution? And within that, there's this like when I was born and when I was growing up, a bunch of uh, a lot of things happened to me. I had to do what I had to do to survive in order to get my needs met, and I made it until where I am today. And a bunch of things happened to me in my life to get here, and I constructed stories around those things and created meaning out of that, and that became my story of who I am. And so uh, I guess it just comes back to this idea that, like, events don't inherently have meaning. We create meaning out of them.
I have studied internal family systems therapy, and
Mm,
so it's kind of a similar
yeah.
concept. Like you have the self, which is like your true self, and then your
Hmm.
in your mind or ego or psyche, you have these parts that were
Hmm.
kind of formed throughout your life. And it sounds like it's similar to what you're saying.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, yeah, I think it's very similar. I love when I like find things that are similar in different fields, because it just, to me, it brings it down to brass tacks, right? To just like these are things that show up in lots of areas, right? And so for me to explore, I think what really unlocked this concept of ego for me. I think ego is really something that I came into backwards. But I remember when I first started learning about emotional awareness, and I was at a workshop with Dr. Eve Ekman, who did she and her father did a 10-year study with the Dalai Lama on the Atlas of Emotions, and it was all based on emotional awareness. And what do emotional awareness researchers around the globe, what do they agree on? And they just want to know, what do they agree on? And she stood up there and said, emotional awareness is your experience of your life. So this means if your level of emotional awareness is stunted through culturalization, lack of vocabulary, because like our human language in our mind is what, if I say I'm angry or if I feel stressed, well, that is my relationship with that physical reaction that's happening in my body. So if your emotional awareness is stunted, then your experience of your life is stunted. For me to come back to ego, like, one of the big things that I learned that unlocked things for me was when I used to think that, like, love was an emotion. And
Okay.
there's all of these really awesome. Have you ever read the book or heard of the book "The Language of Emotions" by Carla McLaren?
No.
No. Okay. So she has some great pieces on why love is not an emotion, and one of the general ideas is that, like, we can have every human emotion and still be in love, right? Still be tapped into love.
If love is not an emotion,
Mm-hmm.
what is it, or how would you describe love?
Mm. So Alain de Botton, he did a great piece on this, and what he does is he breaks it down into four things. He says there's love, desire, needs, and attraction. And love is not desire, it's not getting your needs met, and it's not attraction. So desire, from the Buddhist perspective, is the choice to be unhappy until you have what you want. So desire is not bad or good. It's constructive in the sense that having desire creates ambition to go get what you want, because you'll be happy until you get it. But if you desire everything, well, then you are really you're choosing to desire everything and to be unhappy. And so the what is important is to notice what you desire and to choose that desire, to follow that desire wisely.
To
Yep.
not let it overtake you or not be possessed by it, or you just be aware
Mm-hmm.
of it and know that it's there. Is that the
Yeah.
idea?
Yeah. And to let it go if you, right. And because
Okay.
then you can come back to integrity. But so desire, and then there's needs and attraction. And so needs, we have to do things when we are young before we are consciously aware and capable of getting our needs met. We aren't aware of what our nurturing patterns are. We aren't aware of if our parents are good parents or bad parents. We aren't aware of the culture that we are born into. We are just surviving and we're getting our needs met. And then at that stage of our development, we learn a series of scripts and ways of acting, right? And who knows if those are healthy or unhealthy or constructive or destructive for our development. They just are. And then attraction tends to come from our nurturing patterns. So if I was over nurtured or if I was under nurtured, then whatever I am used to before I was aware is what makes me feel calm, right? So if I was over nurtured, I feel more calm being over nurtured. So if I'm with a partner who's under nurturing, I feel agitated, right? And that builds attraction, this duality. But love is not desire. It's not these getting your needs met, and it's not attraction. And so he comes back to like, what is love? And from Charles Cooley's Looking Glass Self, he says, I don't know who I am. And this is how we get to ego, right? Is I don't know who I am, and you don't know who you are, right? Like we're all deeply alone inside of our minds, right? And I am just trying to reach across this divide to communicate with you, right? Hoping that you understand what it is that I am trying to get across to you, and you are trying to do the same with me. Who knows if we're actually connecting? But I don't know who I am, and you don't know who you are. I am who I think I am, and you are who you think I think you are. And I am rewriting this in my mind, constructing my sense of self. I am who I think my mom thinks I am. I am who I think my high school professors thought I was. I am who I think my coworkers think I am. And I construct this identity and this story of like, well, for me, I was an athlete in high school. I was tough. I was aggressive. Um, I was driven, right? And yet, when I got older, I learned that I was actually carrying a lot of anger. That driven, that decisiveness, that ability to focus and break through ADD, a lot of that came from emotions of having to achieve and overcome. Of I'm going to prove you wrong, from a relationship with a parent that made me deeply angry. And that anger and that emotion constructed this, like, also got me all of the things I was proud of. And am I that guy? Am I that person? When on inside there's like a true self, there's someone else I didn't know. And so what love is personal understanding, not just known by me, but understood by me. So, like, having some lived life experience of knowing my internal self, and not just knowing it myself, but seeing it through another person and feeling accepted. And so, the closest word from Alain de Botton's perspective in his philosophy is that the closest human word to love, emotion, is acceptance, being accepted, feeling accepted. And it's a choice, it's an energy. And what I notice in this conversation, right, to come to ego, is that healing, right? Like healing for me as a masculine dude that grew up in New England, Protestant, broy, tough, right? Like work hard, play hard. My culturalization around manhood was being strong and steadfast on the outside. For me, the word healing, I didn't have a concept of what healing was. Healing was like a term that I didn't really, I understood what it meant to physically heal, but to
Right.
then go through my maturation and my conscious realization of realizing that the problems in my life, right, this tension, maybe showing up to that and coming to the places inside that block me from that true self, and relaxing, opening, connecting, feeling those emotions that I thought were bad to feel. But in reality, there are no good or bad emotions. They're only constructive or destructive reactions to them. So the closer I would get to those places inside that hurt that I was previously running from in anger, I realized this is acceptance. This is love. And then realizing that that thing that was on top, on the outside, that was ego.
Curious about what, because you seem like a fairly young person. What
Yeah.
led you to the point where you even considered that you needed to be healed? Because a lot of people don't realize that until later. Was it like an event, or were you just miserable?
What's so cool is I don't think that I ever went searching to be healed. I wanted to learn about myself. What a
Well,
what a great question.
the reason I ask that is because a lot of times when I meet with someone for the first time who's coming in for healing, that's basically why they're coming.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of the questions is, what brought you here? Why now?
Mm.
And the thing that you said, I was curious. It was like, that's one of the characteristics of self is curiosity. So it's like your desire to be reconciled to yourself. Like you were separate living just out of your ego. And then it's like you
Mm.
were being called to be reconciled to yourself.
I think that externally, from an egoic perspective, I had like an inside and an outside from sport. I think creation, like art, building a business, entrepreneurship, creativity, like all of these endeavors can be spiritual practices, right?
Yes.
Because you are taking some part of your internal self and trying to you're creating problems, right? That have to be like if like one of my favorite things from the fundamentals of spiritual psychology that I always come back to is that like the problems in our life are our curriculum, and we each have our own. And the difference between living unconsciously and consciously is, do I, when something happens to me and I say I have a problem with, do I react to that because a negative reaction is bad? And that's one of the coolest things that unlock things, this stuff with emotional awareness, is that there are no good or bad emotions. There's only constructive or destructive reactions. If I feel anger and I have all of this relationship story in my mind of how anger hurts people and anger is bad, well, then I won't ever want to experience or go back to those places inside that I have built this relationship with, of like, that is a bad emotion to feel, right? And so it blocks me from getting to that, from sitting in it, right, and experiencing it, right, and embodying it and letting it go, and realizing that I am not this emotion, right? I am not this thing that happened to me. I am something deeper inside. And so I think that the going into those places and being realizing that, like, as a young man racing bikes and inflicting myself on this sport, and then going into the world of business and work and realizing, like, I am not this software sales guy that everybody has seen me. I'm something else. I didn't go to college. I didn't subscribe to that traditional thing. So it created like an internal, external, and it created agitation, like a feeling of like, what, who am I? Right? Like, am I this person that wins a race, or am I this person that does this thing? Am I my job? And I think it's just been like a progressive unraveling and noticing and learning and deepening, and then realizing, stumbling on healing and realizing, like, wow, that's healing. I didn't even know I could do that.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like you started asking the questions and getting curious about yourself, and it just led you to the path of healing and deepening.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was. And so that's to come back to that ego thing, right? Is it's like, oh, that's what ego is. It's this story or this construct that I was living, and it's not bad. That's what started this conversation, was that some writing on like that the ego isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Right. We live in a Judeo-Christian society. That idea of you having to take control of your flesh, I think that's kind of prevalent. Usually, even like big motivational speakers now will say, you just have to cut it off, you have to beat it down, whatever. And so when I saw you say that the ego is not a bad thing, I'm like, yes, it's not good or bad, it just is. And I think that's what your poem was sort of saying.
That's one of the tools, or one of the things that we have to bring into a container of non-judgmental awareness in order to do this type of me search, is to mentally and emotionally contrast events and experiences. We have to remove this judgmental bad or good, and not in the sense of giving anybody permission to do bad or good, but for just my own me search. Realize like, okay, wait, there are no good or bad emotions. Anger is not bad. There's a constructive or destructive reaction to that emotion that created my experience of it. Anger can take a life, or anger can save a life. Yet my socialization around and my story in my head about whatever created these physical reactions in my body that I wanted to remove myself from, those are the places that are scary inside to go back to. When I sit in circle with men and we teach emotional awareness, it's like breakthrough moments of realizing, when you break through that vulnerability and that trust, you realize like, oh, we have been doing this all along. And now I've widened my emotional spectrum. So now when I sit in the kitchen, or I stand in the kitchen, and I have my partner is experiencing some type of emotion or trying to tell me about her life or her day, and she's having a challenging time, I don't need to make my partner feel better in order to be in a good relationship. I can actually sit with those difficult emotions. I don't need her to feel better. I can ask her, what are you feeling? Right?
So you're just holding the space for her.
Yeah. We're learning what empathy feels like, sitting in it and not needing to make a person feel better.
You're not your mind and emotions. You are that which thinks about your mind and emotions.
Yeah.
But just to observe that, you can observe your thoughts and emotions, and you do that from self or from your center. And that term you used, non-judgmental awareness, is really how you're witnessing your own self. And I think that's very powerful, to allow yourself to feel what you feel, to check in with yourself, compassion and benevolence.
Being an athlete, right? Like being a high performance athlete at an early age, I had experiences with coaches that were deeply real and accepting. You can't hide from your physical abilities. When you go out and you go for a run, or you go out to do a physical thing, you either do it or you don't. I think individuals will think that the result is what matters, that I say I'm going to do something and then I actually do it. And what I discovered at an early age was that it wasn't that I do that thing that was important. What's important is that I show up afterwards, either internally on my own, to be able to come back to this thing and to look at like what I didn't do or what I did do, and that I can repeatedly do that without beating myself up or being self-critical. And I think that is like a very special relationship, a truly non-judgmental, safe relationship where they could feel what it feels like to be accepted and then go for something and then fail and then still come back and have that not be the problem. I didn't get parented like that. And that could come back to what is love, right? Like it's acceptance.
Yeah, and I feel like that has to happen in your own self first, non-judgmental awareness to yourself, and then that sort of love and acceptance can then flow out to your community, to your family, to your partner. Let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit, just to wrap up here, a little bit about what's going on. You're mentioning that noise we can hear in the background is a vacuum from your neighbor. Everybody's on lockdown. For people that are suffering currently, or maybe arguing with what is, or challenging their new reality, a lot of people
Mm.
aren't happy about it. Would you challenge them just to observe the story that they're telling themselves as a way to help themselves?
Mm. Noticing my body, then labeling how I'm feeling, right? Like I call one exercise the rock exercise, relax, open, connect. So I'd say I notice the room, the space around me, right? I notice three things: the cactus in the corner, the plant hanging from the ceiling, the cat sleeping in the corner. I notice my hands in my lap, my fingers are crossed together, my socks are cold, my feet are cold. Emotionally, I feel tightness in my chest. I feel calm, patient, open, and seen. And so I'm just coming out of it now. I might do that and then realize that, okay, this story of where I am is just another story. I guess that's just an example.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that was a really beautiful example of how I tell people that they need to get grounded in their present moment. The
Yeah.
present moment is really the portal for that true self. You can't get there if you're in the past or the future. And that's where these stories are. So I think you
Yeah.
giving that demonstration for people is it's really powerful that you can challenge those stories and rewrite them and bring peace to yourself. So
I mean, I'm also a normal dude who gets gets trapped in his own stuff. So
yeah, just because you use these tools doesn't mean that you necessarily mastered them. I think that's important to point out to people too. You never master these concepts. You just use them and get further along down the road, I believe.
the point of this work is not to not have problems. It's to be able to show up after you come out of fight or flight to reduce that amount of time of reaction and to be able to find a place of connection and to drop in and to come back to whatever happened and inspect it and learn from that and show up in a more empowering way the next time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. Can you
Yeah.
give people an idea of where they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me at Chris Lee Wilson on Instagram or at the Unshakable Man, unshakableman.me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, hopefully we'll get to talk again soon, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.